Her scream sliced through the evening air like a blade, sharp and unyielding, as Officer Daniel Hargrove's boot connected with Aisha Carter's side. The crowd on the busy Harlem sidewalk gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the oxygen from street. Aisha, a 32-year-old nurse, crumpled to the pavement, her grocery bag spilling apples and a loaf of bread across the cracked concrete. She'd done nothing wrong, just walked out of the corner store, her scrubs still wrinkled from a 12-hour shift saving lives at St. Luke's Hospital. But to Hargrove, a cop with a reputation for targeting black residents, her existence was provocation enough. The altercation had started over nothing. Aisha had been waiting at the crosswalk, scrolling through her phone, when Hargrove barked at her to move along. She looked up, confused, and asked, "Why?" "I'm just standing here." That was enough to set him off. His face reddened, veins bulging at his temples, and he'd shoved her, demanding her ID. When she reached for her purse, he misinterpreted the motioner. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he wanted an excuse. His kick was swift, deliberate, and it sent a shock wave through the onlookers. "Don't touch me." Aisha's voice cracked as she pushed herself up, clutching her side. Her eyes, wide with pain and fury, locked onto Hargrove's. The crowd, a mix of young and old, locals and passersby, began to close in, their murmurs growing into shouts. Phones were out, recording, the red dots of cameras glinting like fireflies in the fading light. Hargrove, a stocky man in his late 40s with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, sneered. "You people always make trouble," he spat, his words dripping with venom. Aisha's heart pounded, not just from the pain but from the weight of those words, "you people." She'd heard them before, in subtle slights and overt insults, but never paired with such raw violence. She was no stranger to prejudice. Growing up in Harlem, she'd navigated its sting her whole life. But this was different. This was public, brazen, a cop's boot against her body in front of dozens of witnesses. Yet, even as her ribs throbbed, Aisha felt a fire ignite within her. She wouldn't cower. "Back off!" Hargrove shouted at the crowd, his hand hovering near his holster. The tension was electric, a storm ready to break. A young man, barely out his teens, stepped forward, his phone still recording. "You can't do that, man. We saw everything." His voice trembled but held firm. Others echoed him, their voices rising into a chorus of defiance. Hargrove's eyes darted, his confidence faltering as he realized he was surrounded not just by people, but by evidence. Aisha forced herself to stand, her breath shallow but steady. "You think you can just kick me and walk away?" she said, her voice low but cutting. "I'm a nurse. I save lives every day. What do you do?" The question hung in the air, sharp and accusing. Hargrove's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a woman in the crowded bodega owner named Maria pushed through, her face a mask of outrage. "You're done, officer. We're not letting this go." The street was alive now, a pulsing organism of anger and solidarity. Maria's words were a spark, igniting the crowd's resolve. People shouted, some cursing Hargrove, others demanding justice. Aisha, still clutching her side, felt a hand on her shoulder. It was an older man, his face lined with years of seeing too much. "You okay, sister?" he asked softly. She nodded, though the pain said otherwise. "They're with you," he whispered, gesturing to the crowd. "We're with you." Hargrove's radio crackled, but he ignored it, his eyes scanning for an escape. He hadn't expected Thesa community uniting against him. He was used to fear, not resistance. But the phones kept recording, the voices kept rising, and the weight of his actions began to press down on him. Aisha saw it in his face, the flicker of doubt, the realization that this wasn't just another stop-and-frisk gone wrong. This was a reckoning. As the crowd grew louder, a second officer arrived, a younger man named Torres. Unlike Hargrove, his face showed discomfort, his eyes flicking between Aisha and the crowd. "What's going on here?" Torres asked, his voice cautious. Hargrove snapped, "Handle these people." But Torres hesitated, seeing the phones, the anger, the woman on the ground with spilled groceries and a bruised side. He stepped toward Aisha, offering a hand. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Aisha ignored his hand, but met his gaze. "I'm hurt," she said, "but I'm not broken." Her words were a declaration, not just to Torres, but to everyone watching. The crowd roared in agreement, their voices a wall of sound that seemed to shake the street. Hargrove's face paled. He crossed the line, and there was no going back. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the street in a golden glow that felt almost defiant. Aisha stood taller, her pain secondary to her purpose. She wasn't just a victim, she was a catalyst. The crowd's energy fed her, their outrage mirroring her own. Maria, the bodega owner, was on her phone now, calling local activists. The young man with the camera was live streaming, his voice steady as he narrated the scene. "This cop just attacked a woman for no reason," he said. "We need everyone here now." Word spread like wildfire. Within minutes, more people arrived: activists, neighbors, even a local reporter who'd been tipped off. Hargrove's bravado crumbled as the crowd swelled, their chants of "no justice, no peace" echoing off the buildings. Torres, caught between duty and decency, tried to de-escalate, urging Hargrove to step back. But Hargrove was trapped, his authority unraveling with every second. Aisha's eyes never left him. She saw the man behind the badge, the fear in his eyes as the consequences of his actions closed in. She didn't want his fear, she wanted accountability. "You don't get to hide," she said, her voice steady now. "Not today." The crowd cheered, their unity a force Hargrove couldn't ignore. For the first time, he looked small, diminished by the weight of his own choices. As sirens wailed in the distance, signaling more police on the way, Aisha felt a strange calm. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The street, the people, the cameras, they were all witnesses to a moment that could change things. She wasn't just fighting for herself, but for everyone who'd ever felt the sting of a system that saw them as less. The pain in her side was real, but so was her resolve. This was her stand, and she wasn't alone. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the crowd's chants like a warning. Aisha Carter stood firm, her side aching but her spirit unyielding. The Harlem Street was a battlefield now, not of fists but of ideals: justice versus power, community versus oppression. Officer Daniel Hargrove's face was a mask of defiance, but cracks were showing. The crowd, now numbering in the dozens, pressed closer, their phones still recording, their voices a relentless tide. "No justice, no peace," they chanted, the words a heartbeat that pulsed through the concrete. Hargrove's partner, Officer Torres, looked increasingly uneasy. He tried to calm the situation, but the weight of what he'd witnessed, Hargrove's unprovoked attack on Aisha, was too heavy to ignore. "We need to wait for backup," Torres said, his voice low, almost pleading. Hargrove shot him a glare. "Backup? I don't need backup to handle this." But his bravado was hollow. The crowd wasn't backing down, and neither was Aisha. She stepped forward, ignoring the pain shooting through her ribs. "You think you could just walk away from this?" she asked, her voice carrying over the noise. "You think you can kick me, call me you people, and go home like nothing happened?" The crowd roared, their anger amplifying her words. Aisha wasn't just speaking for herself, she was giving voice to every person who'd ever been targeted, dismissed, or dehumanized. Her scrubs, stained with dirt from the pavement, felt like armor now. Maria, the bodega owner, was back, her phone pressed to her ear. "The news is coming," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Channel 7's on their way." The crowd erupted, their energy surging. Aisha caught Maria's eye and nodded, a silent thank you. The young man live streaming, whose name she later learned was Jamal, kept his phone steady. "This is going viral," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "The whole world's going to see this." Hargrove's eyes darted to the crowd, then to the street, where the first news van was pulling up. A reporter, a woman with a microphone and a determined look, jumped out, her cameraman already rolling. "Officer, what happened here?" she called, pushing through the crowd. Hargrove froze, his hand still near his holster, but the confidence he'd worn like a badge was gone. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth was on every phone, in every pair of eyes watching him. Torres stepped in, trying to salvage the situation. "Ma'am," he said to Aisha, "let's get you checked out. You need medical attention." Aisha shook her head. "I'm a nurse. I know what I need. And it's not your pity, it's justice." Her words were a spark, igniting the crowd again. They pressed closer, their chants growing louder, more unified. Hargrove's radio crackled again, this time with a dispatcher's voice. "Unit 12, stand down. Superviseur en route." The words hit Hargrove like a punch. He turned to Torres, his voice low and venomous. "You're letting this happen?" Torres didn't answer, his eyes fixed on Aisha. For the first time, she saw something like respect in his gaze. He wasn't her ally, not yet, but he wasn't her enemy either. The crowd sensed the shift, their energy focusing on Hargrove. "Arrest him," someone shouted. "He assaulted her," another voice added. The calls for accountability were a chorus now, impossible to ignore. The supervisor, a stern-faced woman named Lieutenant Brooks, arrived with 2 more officers. She took one look at the scene: Hargrove's flushed face, Aisha's torn scrubs, the crowd's unrelenting chants, and her expression hardened. "Officer Hargrove, step back," she ordered. Hargrove hesitated, his pride warring with the reality closing in. Brooks didn't wait for compliance. She turned to Aisha. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" Aisha recounted the incident, her voice steady despite the pain. She didn't embellish, she didn't need to. The crowd backed her up, their voices overlapping with details. Jamal stepped forward, showing Brooks's footage. "It's all here," he said. He kicked her for no reason. Brooks watched the video, her face unreadable but her eyes narrowing. When it finished, she turned to Hargrove. "Hand over your badge and weapon. You're on administrative leave, effective immediately." The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of triumph washing over the street. Hargrove's face contorted, a mix of rage and disbelief. "You can't do this," he shouted, but Brooks was unmoved. "You did this to yourself," she said, her voice cold. The other officers flanked Hargrove, escorting him to a patrol car as the crowd jeered. Aisha watched, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with something new: hope. The reporter was at Aisha's side now, microphone extended. "Can you tell us your story?" she asked. Aisha took a deep breath, the pain in her ribs a reminder of what she'd endured. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is about every Black person who's been hurt, ignored, or silenced. We're not invisible. We're not going anywhere." The crowd cheered again, their voices carrying her words into the night. As the news crew filmed, activists arrived, organizing the crowd into a peaceful protest. Aisha, still aching, joined them, her presence a beacon. Jamal's live stream had reached thousands, and social media was ablaze with hashtags: "Justice for Aisha," and "Police Violence." The wooden newsstand nearby, its sign reading "Justice Fights Back" in bold ink, became a rallying point, a symbol of the moment. Days later, Hargrove's suspension made headlines. The footage shared across platforms sparked investigations into his history of misconduct. Aisha's story inspired protests, petitions, and calls for reform. She returned to her job at St. Luke's, her ribs healing, but her resolve stronger than ever. The community rallied around her, Maria bringing her meals, Jamal checking in daily. Lieutenant Brooks, moved by Aisha's courage, pushed for systemic changes within the precinct. Aisha knew the fight wasn't over. One officer's suspension didn't dismantle centuries of injustice. But as she stood on that Harlem street, surrounded by people who'd become her family in that moment, she felt the power of their unity. They'd turned pain into purpose, fear into action. Hargrove's kick had meant to break her, but instead, it had ignited a movement. And Aisha Carter, nurse, daughter, survivor, was at its heart, her voice echoing long after the sirens faded. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.